The reason why the Newman motor, the Joseph Newman energy machine, is a perpetual motion machine is not because it routes energy output, energy back into itself. That's one way to define perpetual motion, but there's another way, and that is the maintenance of an everlasting dipole. Some people are aware of this, even some of the naysayers, who don't like the direction that certain people like to take electrical engineering in, claiming machines that are perpetual motion or something along that line. But they do recognize the dipole and the need to maintain the dipole and not kill the dipole. Well, what does Tom Bearden say about killing the dipole? We have to not send current back to the source. And John Bedini would say, yeah, right, I do fancy switching. Well, I insert the word fancy, he didn't use that word. I do switching to prevent the return of current to the source. I instead send it somewhere else. Intelligent switching. So, but I've got another definition of my own by studying my LT-SPICE simulations of my attempt to approximate Joseph Newman's energy machine, and that is this. The magnet and the rest of the circuit, the spinning magnetic field and the rest of the circuit, are two separate circuits that are isolated from each other. Just like an isolation transformer stands in between two circuits. There's a reason for that. Sometimes it comes in handy. It does a good thing. And in this case, what ends up happening is that you get a preponderance of amperage accumulating at the spinning magnetic field and a preponderance of voltage at the battery pack, which already, Newman uses a high level of voltage minus any amperage to speak of. Little 9-volt batteries strung in a series to create 300 volts, but very little amp hours. You would expect that kind of arrangement to become depleted very rapidly, in a matter of minutes, but they don't, because he's supplying amperage from the spinning magnetic field. And so here we have a dipole, but not the kind of dipole that we would normally think or be told is. In other words, positive voltage at one terminal at one pole and negative at the other. No, here we have something similar, but it's more sophisticated in its understanding. Because when you have amperage at one side and volts at the other, don't you have, one polarity of volts at that other end versus the amperage side? In a sense you do, but not exactly. It's a little different. And it's actually very elegant what Joseph Newman has done. By putting amps at one end embodied within this rotating magnetic field and putting volts at the other embodied within the string of 9-volt batteries, he's literally created a dipole, and because he's isolated the two and maintained their isolation, he literally has a perpetual motion machine, not because he routes energy back into the source from the output, but because he maintains a dipole, and not because the dipole are the two extreme polarities of voltage, but the extreme polarity of voltage versus amperage. This is uncanny. I've never heard anybody talk about maintaining the dipole or don't kill the dipole in this respect. This is like way out of the norm, yet my simulation points this out. That's one of the salient features of my simulation, is that we've got my latest simulation, is.gd/Newman numeral 15 JPG as a JPEG, file, or ASC, the the LT-SPICE programming, the software file, the text file that will bring up the circuit. Newman 15 JPEG or Newman 15 ASC, is.gd before that. Those will bring up the two files that I have over at my archive.org posting of chapter 6 of Newman's book, along with a few other pages from the 8th edition that have to do with some hints on building your own Newman motor. I mean, Newman figured out, well, he's not going to patent the thing, so he might as well tell people how to build it. Which Jeffrey Miller over at energybat.com, energybat.com, has done over in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Anyway, for quite a number of decades. So the simulation points out a very unique dipole. Now, why I say this, I've noticed this before. The amperage is up in the kiloamp range, around 5 kiloamps, I believe. And the voltage, of course, is, 300 volts from the battery pack. So I say this because I was attempting to make modifications, further improvements. Adding the neon bulb was good. Putting in the capacitor is good. Tweaking the values of all the components, such as reducing the inductance on the spinning magnetic field, is good. But I tried to go further. I tried to short out the two dipoles, because I figured, well, if I blend them and then tie them together and make them that one lead, and then ground is the other, and put a load in between, or actually no, put a capacitor in between, and then connect a load in parallel to the capacitor, maybe something will happen. And something did happen. I drained the battery pack at the rate of 5 kiloamps. In other words, I united the two dipoles. And of course, that's not over unity. That just means I'm draining the battery pack a whole lot faster than before, because before it was 1.5 milliamps drainage on the battery pack, and negative no less. But in this case, it was 5 kiloamps positive, because that's what the kiloamps are at the spinning magnetic field. It's positive. It's not negative. So I wasn't doing myself any good, but I did manage to point out to myself what I was already beginning to suspect, that Newman has invented a new definition of the dipole and a new definition or a new protocol in how to go about maintaining that dipole. And it's just uncanny. The more I study Newman, here's this country bumpkin, simple-minded guy who never made it beyond, a grade school education or something, but he's got street smarts. He knows how to make a living, inventing things. Unfortunately, it was politically not correct to come forward with this invention of his. It's really a teaching tool. Well, at the moment, that's all it is. It certainly doesn't have any marketability, since nobody wants to market it, because it's against public policy to market anything like this. But it does teach, and it teaches very well in a very simple way, yet these are basic fundamental principles that are not easily taught unless they are taught within the vehicle of a simple idea such as Newman's energy machine. There's no other way to learn it. I mean, I'm not an electrical engineer, and even still, if I were, I wouldn't be open-minded anyway. So either way, it doesn't matter whether you're a protagonist or an antagonist. Either way, it's going to be difficult to learn this stuff because it's not part of our social matrix of thinking. It's not there in our culture. And that's, because there was so much incredible resistance against Newman popularizing his machine. Because it does give a mechanical advantage. What I was trying to do was to see if I could convert the thing into an electrical generator, and I failed. There's no way to do it because you have to isolate the amps from the volts. And by doing that, it's worthless as an electrical generator. But it is not worthless as a mechanical generator of torque. It's superb at creating torque, mechanical torque. Now, I was reading on LT-Spice models of motors, and what I suspected, was shared by the person who was, the various articles talking about modeling an LT-Spice a motor, because LT-Spice doesn't allow you to model it, but you can do the equivalent. And this guy did come up with an equivalent model, and he was saying that voltage is equivalent to torque, and current is equivalent to speed. And that doesn't surprise me. I learned that was in a spiritual textbook that I read several decades ago. That torque versus speed are inversely related to each other, and then it's easy to see, voltage is pressure, that must be torque, and it's just a little thinking. Doesn't take much, to figure out the equivalence. Well, this guy modeling LT-Spice motors electric motors was saying the same thing. So when we look at Newman's energy machine, we see torque on the one side, that's one dipole, and speed on the other, but we don't make use of the speed because that's the magnetic flux of the spinning magnetic field. What we make use of is its influence, its indirect influence across a magnetic boundary or gap between itself and the massive copper coil that Newman keeps boasting is the sole source of all the energy in his machine, which is not true. It's a pickup coil. It's functioning as a magnetic pickup coil, just like you would have a magnetic pickup device on an acoustic guitar, you know, playing on stage, and you send a signal to the amplifier to amplify that signal, but you've got a pickup coil on the instrument in question, or you may have it on the strings themselves, picking up the vibration of the strings and turning them into magnetic signals. In any case, that's what his massive coil is doing. It's picking up the magnetic field of this spinning bar magnet, permanent magnet, inside that coil, or off to one side, as the case may be. And that's a dipole. The extreme amperage of the spinning magnetic field, or the magnetic field alone, but set in rotation motion to be able to harness it readily, you know, just like the rotating magnetic field of any motor or generator. And then the other dipole is the voltage coming from the battery pack, which has no amps to speak of. So it's a perfect dipole. That's what his energy machine is. It's a new definition to what a dipole is, or what constitutes a dipole. So this sheds a whole new light on Thomas Bearden, who has been stressing this notion of don't kill the dipole. Well, that's what Newman does. He never kills it. And in my mucking around, I killed it and just messed things worse. I still got power, but I was killing the battery pack, and I was killing it very fast, so I was killing the dipole. Well, his machine, when it's tweaked right, does not kill the dipole because all that amps does filter through its way through the circuit and make its way finally back to the battery pack and give it a tiny little reverse current to make sure the battery pack never drains itself of amp hours. So you can have a tiny amp hour battery pack of a string of, 3 dozen 9-volt batteries or whatever Newman uses to produce a lot of volts, because you're going to need those volts. And I couldn't figure out why. I tried lowering the volts and it didn't work. In my simulation, I had to have 300 volts in the battery pack. But that's because you have to have a dipole of high volts on one side and high amps on the other of this isolation transformer setup that he has going between the massive copper coil and the spinning bar magnet inside of it. He literally has an isolation transformer going on in there, helping to create a dipole. So, everything else considered in a circuit taken into consideration. So it's a simple circuit to teach a simple idea, and without having to get complicated and lost in the shuffle of a lot of details. There are enough details in this as it is, and it's amazing nobody's gotten it until now. I guess because nobody's bothered to try to simulate it. They're all trying to build it. I try to understand things. I want to understand things, and only if I need to build it will I build it. But so long as I don't need to build it, I won't. And I'll move on to a new topic and study that until I understand it, because I'm more interested in understanding. It gives me a lot of background, so that when I want to talk about or think about this subject, it's easier for me, because I have all this background of studying various circuits that work, or various circuits that are, made to look like they work within the context of a simulator. But here's something we know works if you trust Newman's sincerity. And I usually go on that first. I judge the person first, not on the basis of what he's created. I could care less. But on the basis of who he is. And if he is a sincere person, then only do I study what he has accomplished. Because I don't want to waste my time with somebody who's not sincere. But people who judge Newman on the basis of his device are making a big mistake. because you can't judge the man by his creations. You think you'd go around judging the parents on the basis of what children have come out of their loins? It never works that way. Duh! The children never turn out the same way as the parents. Duh! They're totally their own person. They go their own way, and they go, well, bye-bye, parent, I'll make my own life, and they do. You think you want the same kind of treatment? Judge your parents on the basis of who you are, as the way you treat Newman, some of you, judging him on the basis of what's, the consensus of opinion and authoritative opinion about his energy device? No way. You would never do that about your parents. Why do that with Newman? Oh, well, this is different. This is science. Oh, really? Good grief. So this is the sociological implication that we have going on here. We got problems. We got a number of problems going on, and it's no wonder we're not making headway. Psychological, sociological problems, in addition to our politically correct version of science, turning up its nose at Newman or anybody else who wants to make a contribution, a legitimate contribution. So everybody wants to poo-poo simulations as being, impractical, not buildable. Who gives a fuck? The real issue is, do you get it? Do you understand Newman? And how the hell are you going to if you keep thumbing your nose up at the guy or anybody else like myself who's trying to understand him and trying to spread this around so that more people understand him? I don't have to, feel badly about my use of language, because that is how I feel. I've gone out and took the trouble to integrate myself with the opposite-minded point of views of people who don't feel the same way I do. That's the only way I can learn at any rapid pace, is to mingle with the opposite viewpoint. And yeah, it's shitty, it's very stressful, but I learn. And it's the only way I can actually take their angst and add it to my thoughtfulness to propel me forward at a faster pace, is by mingling with them. And not mingle merely with the comfortable position of people who are like-minded, because I'll go at a snail's pace. I'm not going to learn fast enough. It's more comfortable, but I won't learn at the pace that I learn at. So it's to my advantage to mix with the oppositional point of view. And I gain a lot of insight that way, very quickly. So, doesn't mean you have to do it, but I have to, because I want to learn as fast as possible, because life is short, we age very rapidly, and for the amount of time we have allotted to our lifespan, there's very little we can accomplish, very little. And yet there are so many problems in society, so many misunderstandings, so many ignorant points of view. We have got a lot of work ahead of us. We got enough work to keep everybody busy and nobody duplicating what everybody else is doing, and still have problems left over that need to be solved. That's my point of view as a 5-year-old, 55 years ago, and I still hold to that point of view today. I'm a little angry that most people just want to do what everybody else does and go with the lemming pack, because they can make more money that way and improve their social standing more readily. But we don't learn much that way. We don't gain a whole lot that way. So for the sake of material comforts, creature comforts, I go for the learning. Hands down. It's just better this way, because I'm more concerned about how lackluster is the evolution of society. That bothers me, that it is so mediocre and so lacking in evolutionary sophistication. We really lack evolution. That is what we lack. And growing in technology does not mean we are growing at all. We're growing in technical details. That's it. But we lack fundamental growth of understanding. And that bothers me. It bothered me as a toddler. It bothers me now. Because I could see it as a 5-year-old, and I still see it. Nothing has changed except the Vaseline we've spread over everything, making everything look glossy and beautiful, when it's not. It's not. A little dab of Brill cream does not solve the problem. Just because we've greased our hair doesn't make us a better person. All we have is greased hair. That's it. So much for my soapbox, but it's the pitfalls of learning is looking that, well, human existence is not perfect, and boy, does it leave a lot to be desired. Anywho, so this is the beauty of Newman's device, is that it actually maintains the dipole, and in so doing, it's a perpetual motion machine. I almost said free energy, but it's not free if you take all the energy sources into account, like the energy that went into creating those permanent magnets. That's a lot of energy cost involved. Sure, they'll last a century or more, and not lose a whole lot of strength over the course of each century, but still, it's not for free. It comes at a price. But it sure does look like a perpetual motion machine in my book, because he maintains the dipole. And only by attempting to simulate his device could I see this explicitly laid out in the tracings, the oscilloscope-like tracings of every single component in that simulation. And to look at it and then try to, let it gel several weeks, in my brain, until finally I come to the conclusion, what I've been suspecting all along is true. I've got to say it now. He has created a new definition of maintaining the dipole, and we must honor him and respect him even though he's dead, that he has accomplished something that even Tom Bearden has not accomplished, and Tom Bearden is pretty smart. And here's a country bumpkin doing what Tom Bearden said to do, but in a way Tom Bearden has not told us to do it, as far as I know. I mean, maybe he has, and it just kind of, I don't read all of Tom Bearden's stuff, so what do I know? But from what little I've read, repeated over and over again on his behalf by others, I've never heard this said, this kind of definition of maintaining the dipole. This would be something to ask Peter Lindemann, even though Peter Lindemann is retired. So maybe ask somebody else like Aaron Murakami, I don't know. But who has ever looked at it this way other than Joseph Newman? That's my question to all of you. Can you answer that question and tell me? Because I'm curious. I'd like to know. This is the first time I've ever seen it happen. And I don't want to say I'm the only one who has come up with this realization. I don't want to. I don't want to think that we have been that ignorant all this time. But hey, maybe so. Maybe this is the time to start thinking about maintaining a dipole in a whole different way, along the lines of Joseph Newman, just not so utterly simplistic. Maybe there's a way to make this circuit more sophisticated. I added a neon bulb, in addition to his suggestion to add a capacitor. But that's it. That's all I've managed to do. And I got improved performance very drastically. That neon bulb improved the ratio of performance by a factor of 1,000. So that the energy that it costs the circuit, by comparison to what it puts out, is a gain of 1,000 times greater with the help of that little neon bulb. That's pretty good. I'd say that's pretty good. Something to write home about. But I can't do anything more. And it may be that I just don't understand that. Maybe that's it. I don't know. I'm not an electrical engineer, so I bet there is room for improvement. Bedini always found ways to improve a circuit and keep taking it beyond whatever, comfort zone. Oh, I've done this much, so maybe I'll stay with this. No, he kept taking circuits further and further. So I bet there is a way, but I'm no Bedini. Not by any means. I am no Bedini, not a fat chance. No chance at all. I am no Bedini. I guess that's all I have to say, and emotion too, to get off my chest, because I may not be able to develop my simulation any further, but boy, oh boy, heck, triple heck, this is really an amazing discovery, to think that Joseph Newman has satisfied Tom Bearden and taken Tom one step further, maybe. I don't know, but that's what I see, what little I know about Thomas Bearden. Hats off to both of those guys, and anybody who speaks well of Tom Bearden, because this is really what I'm seeing. This is the fundamental basis of Joseph Newman's device. is the fulfillment of Thomas Bearden in a way that I never could have imagined, and maybe in a way that nobody else has imagined before either. And I'm sure Joseph Newman didn't see this, maybe, or else he would have said so. He certainly talked at length in his book. It's a mammoth book, 600 pages or so, his 8th edition, about a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with electricity. But if he had known this, he would have said it, and so far. I didn't read the whole book. I read a large part of it, but not all of it. And I didn't come across anything of this sort, and nothing from Dr. Hastings doing analysis either. I didn't see this. My simulation shows this. So, either my simulation is lying to me, or I'm lying to myself by not making an accurate simulation, devising an accurate one, or this is true, and this has been overlooked. So take it from me, we got some thinking to do on this subject, and talking amongst each other to see what more we can get out of it. It's unbelievable. It's like more and more layers just keep peeling away. Layers of understanding. And yet it's such a simple little thing. Not too many parts to it. You just have to balance everything just right. Their values to get it to function properly. A negative current on the battery pack. That's the main thing. And of course you don't short out the coil. My latest development, now that I have the capacitor and the neon bulb in place, is I don't need to self-short the coil anymore. I can take that out, and it runs even slightly better without that short. So now I simply have 50% duty cycle on, 50% duty cycle off on the square waves coming out of the battery pack, and then the sine waves coming out of the rotating magnetic field, and the two getting blended together at their junction meeting ground of the massive copper coil. That might be why it has to be so massive, because of the impedance that's being created on that coil, and the purpose of that coil is to blend those two energies, the AC and the DC, and maybe it has to be massive to blend those two energies efficiently instead of just wasting it all. People have complained about the impedance on the coil, but they don't understand or appreciate the fact that it's a massive coil, and the current coming from the voltage source, the battery pack, is very minimal. So there's that impedance on the coil is not really detrimental. It's not allowed to become very detrimental. It's detrimental, there's no question about it, but it's not allowed to become very detrimental in such a way that it would hamper the efficiency of the circuit overall. It still is a very efficient circuit despite the impedance exhibited in a few places on that circuit, and the coil is one of them. So it's a marvel of invention what Joseph Newman has managed to come up with. Truly a marvel and a blessing. And it's too bad he had to suffer so much the pain of trying to promote it. But if he really is a soldier who was born on this planet to give us gifts of invention, I'm not surprised that he had the karma of a soldier's life. Not just the Korean War or the whatever war he fought in. I believe it was the Korean War. It's this other war of trying to promote ideas that could do more than enrich our lives in a mild way, such as his plastic dumbbells or his flywheel to go on the back wheel of a bicycle to help you do wheelies. But this idea of a perpetual motion machine by maintaining the dipole in a whole new way, he literally had to fight tooth and nail, and he suffered tremendously psychological stress from this because he couldn't win. It was a battle he could not win in his lifetime. And I don't expect to win in mine. It's not easy going, trying to promote an electrical renaissance in today's world. It's just there's too many people fighting that sort of thing to be able to make it happen. If you do it in your garage, fine, but nobody else wants to know what you've done. They don't want to know, let alone talk about it. It hurts their ears, literally. I'm not making this up. It literally hurts their ears to listen to such crap, in their view. Why should we waste our time if we already know it's crap to begin with? Talk about prejudice. Good grief. Do we say that about blacks and Jews? I hope not. Or women? I hope not. But we say it about devices that are uncanny in how they behave. I'm sorry, I have a hard time shutting up here, don't I? It really pisses me off, but there's nothing I can do about it except make sure I piss in the toilet and not on the floor or in my bed. So, okay, on that note, I'm going to shut up.